Hello and welcome to Defense Diaries. I'm your host Bob Mata, and this is our continuing coverage and our weekly Q&A for Murder on Songbird Road. And I am once again joined by my fabulous and brilliant co-host and partner in crime, Lauren Brian Pacheco. What is up, Lauren?
I don't know about the brilliant thing because I just figured out how to post comments. It was blocking me before. It was blocking me. But I logged on
See,
early.
when I pressured you to take a screen grab, miraculously it started to work. See, that's
Did
how I do.
Lauren do voice work for a fraternity news report? No.
I think you
Damn.
should, though. You should. I think you really should. All right, here's what before we get started, I want you to do your imitation of your mother. Just give us like 10 seconds of it.
Oh, that's awful. But my mother always acts as if the phone called her, even when she's leaving a voicemail. So you'll get a voicemail like this. Oh, hello, dear. No need to call me back, but that's my mother.
It's so good. It's so good. I can completely every time you do it, I'm envisioning your mom. Like, oh, I just love it. I love it. All right, so we're back, episode 7. Episode 7. What was your favorite thing about 7?
Define favorite because there were a lot of mind-blowingly just frustrating things that we uncovered that made things even more, to quote you, unbelievable.
Mhm.
Your favorite word of
I
this
love that
podcast.
word. It's just blows my mind. It's so unbelievable.
But I have to say I loved Billy Joe. I loved not only meeting Billy Joe, but I love how dedicated she is to helping Renee because she had experienced a very similar family trauma based on the lack of a proper investigation into her brother's disappearance. And so, Billy Joe's solid. She puts her efforts where she thinks they will be best suited, and she fights for the people she cares about, and Renee's definitely one of those people.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it was an interesting one because like in that trip we had met with a lot of people, and um we had been able to sit down with the PI too, who was really interesting guy. I just it was a good episode because we're really starting to get into the weeds at this point, and I'm anxious to hear what you guys are thinking out there in the chat. Like we're starting to like throw you guys some crumbs of what we're discovering, and because it's like we're not trying to make the case. You know what I mean? It's like this isn't a thing where we're trying to make the case. It's like we're reporting on it in a way that's intellectually honest, but at some point, we start to feel the way that we're feeling. You know what I mean? Which
It
translates into how the pod sounds. You know what I mean?
well,
It's
it's we didn't set out with any kind of an agenda. You and I were just speaking about this earlier today. There was no presumption of anything when we started, and then we started investigating the investigation.
yeah,
And that's where things got really interesting and really problematic. Um, to me, the fact that the property next door exists and that was not subjected to closer scrutiny with a wooded backdrop and multiple little bodies of water. Think about that. That's the kind of tunnel vision we're talking about
yeah,
when, they and uh, as the episodes continue, it's just bombshell after bombshell. And so, when I said that the wheels come off after episode 5 and 6, I mean it. We will have a bobsled soon.
I mean, for real though, it's like And you and I were talking about it today a little bit earlier. We were and still are at somewhat of a disadvantage because we've never been tendered the full investigation file. You know,
And the gatekeeping on that, you're right. It's really telling. If you have nothing to hide, why the secrecy? And why, honestly, the arrogant abstinent, like the arrogant need to withhold things just for the sake of making me pressure them that much more, get that many more people involved in
yeah.
forcing them to hand over stuff.
I mean,
It's not a good look.
it's not a good look.
Not a good look.
The lady doth protest too much. I mean, it's like it brings your mind right to that place. Like what the hell are they hiding? Like what if you stand behind your work, show your work. It's that simple. I mean, when you're in school in any of your math classes, you couldn't just sit there and say, "Well, I came up with the answer." Well, okay. Well, how did you get there? You
Show
know that
show
that's
us show us your work.
that's how they know that you didn't cheat. And it's no different. It's no different in solving crimes. So, all right. This is an interesting question. Mags had asked, do you think Julia was represented to the best of her lawyer's ability? It looks like they could have made the same discoveries you did, or did they?
Wonderful question, Mags. This is something that we've wrestled with a lot because, first of all, I have tremendous respect for public defenders. Thank God there are people who take on that job because it is relentlessly stressful, um, not overly thankful, and incredibly difficult. And I think that the fact that Thean lost two second chairs and ended up heading into court solo, um, really showed in the things that she did not push back against. As we mentioned last week, a lot of people don't really realize that you are really beholden to the issues that are brought up in court by the defense when it comes to the appeal. So there are a lot of things that we have said. I can't really curse. I guess I could, but
Wait,
but you know,
wait,
could
Lauren, this
not.
is my channel. You can absolutely curse. Are you kidding?
Yeah, but but, you know, mind-numbingly mind-blowing, the things that were not challenged. How do you let evidence evidence, random things that were uncovered in a dump, how is that admissible in court? And I have to be careful with spoilers because I get very, very passionate when it comes to the things that weren't. There are more things, Mags, coming soon that you will just be shocked that were permitted to fly unchallenged during the trial. And in her defense, Julie's public defender did tell us as we started looking into it. You take it from there, Bob.
I,
She
I
was
don't.
very, very candid.
Does that qualify as a defense? I'm not sure. I think fronting the fact that you shit the bed on a case, I don't know. I don't know that it qualifies as a defense. Like she didn't say, "Well, I had 7 trials all lined up one after." It's like I didn't hear any kind of explanation why she really didn't do any work on the case, and it's as simple as that. I mean, when you're kind of looking at a case and you're looking at the representation that somebody received, you can always see it always becomes very evident just exactly how much preparation was taken in furtherance of getting that case to trial. And when it strikes you, if you're watching a case, that it seems like one side or the other is winging it, that's because one side or the other is winging it, that they haven't put in the work that is necessary to really try a case. And in a case like this, putting in the bare minimum is not going to result in an acquittal. It's just not.
Well, let me ask you this. Having gone through them as you have, there are many things. I think that Julie's public defender is an incredibly intelligent woman. There are many things that she would almost get you to the front door and then not knock and go through the door. In
Right.
other words, she would call things out, but not in a confrontational or obvious way. So a lot of that subtlety, I think, likely flew right over the jury's
Totally.
head.
Totally. Because I mean, there is that approach. I mean, there's that approach where, you can't ask one too many questions, but in terms of, and you don't want to come across as if you're dumbing things down for the jurors so as not to offend them, but sometimes you just have to tie things together,
But
like
but Mudge, if you go back, she did pander to the jury. She
100%.
did very much say, "Oh, well, I didn't understand all that stuff. The DNA expert was because I'm no genius. And what is this? CSI Miami? No, we can't test everything." She was playing to them. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. We're on the same team. We might not have the evidence. We might not have a motive, but come on, you guys know she did it.
Yeah.
That was the prosecution
Oh,
in
yeah.
a nutshell.
Yeah, I mean, it was like she was the hammer, I mean, Mudge was very clear with her intent and her words, I mean, she used a lot of big inflammatory words, and that was like she was like I would not consider her to be a scalpel in terms of being precise. She would just hammer the jury over the head with, big and like I said, inflammatory words to really drive home her points. And, but when you're talking about like attacking evidence and then that thing that you were talking about where Thien would get to the precipice, and then seemingly had the expectation that the jury was going to be able to glean what she was spitting at
The
them.
nuance, the subtlety.
It's like, and you can't make that assumption with juries. It's like I'd rather err on the side of, okay, yeah, I'm breaking this down to you like y'all are 5-year-olds, but like I'd rather do that stating what may be obvious to
Mhm.
some on the off chance that it's not obvious to all of them, because you never know what's going to go on back in that deliberation room. If you've got, and in this case where you had an hour and a half deliberation, which tells me there was no deliberation at all. I mean, getting back there, selecting your four-person, going through the jury instructions, taking a straw poll, and they're all raising their hand guilty. And then they're saying, okay, let's shoot the shit for a half an hour. So at least it seems like we talked about this. And then they're coming out and rendering a guilty verdict is telling, so point being is that we know in that particular case, you're not having a 12 angry men guy back there saying, okay, so like, but what about this? Or should we think about, I mean, you're not having that person in the jury room, like helping spur those conversations on about things that may not have added up completely, or things that may have bothered them in terms of like looking at Julie who's sitting at the table and wondering if the physics work. Like, does she have the physicality to have done this? Because like to me, like I start there. Like, yeah, I think you always have to look at, in a case like this, especially, you have to look at the probability of the person being able to actually commit the crime physically. It's like, and when you have this situation wherein we know that Mudge, like, I mean, which picture do we think that she leaned into the most? The 9-year-old tiny little Jade picture, or the
Well,
11-year-old?
so we did get called out on this, so I wanna be very, very clear. Jade went through a very significant growth spurt the last year of her life. And so the picture of Jade in the all pink was actually 14 months old.
Okay.
But she looked, even not to be morbid, but the autopsy pointed out that she looked much older than her age because she was 130 and 5'3". She looked, in pictures that were taken closer to the time of her passing, easily 16, if not 19 years old. Like, she very much looked older
Yeah, she looked like
than.
a young woman,
Yeah,
so it's and to me, the number of months that had passed is irrelevant. It's the perception of it. Like,
perception.
she looked like a 9-year-old in that picture, period, end of conversation, and it's not what she looked like at the time that she was unalived. So, for me, it's it's one of those things that always haunts me about trials where, again, and it goes back to the question, if that goes unchecked, if the state's narrative just is allowed to go unchecked and the evidence is allowed to go unchecked, wherein you're not challenging it in any significant way, I mean, you're just not putting forth the kind of defense that you're going to be able to get an acquittal on. I mean, because this case was a narrative case. That's all it was. There was no real evidence. Like, the entire case was sold on a story, which,
And we will prove that going forward beyond any reasonable doubt.
yeah.
We will. I think that when people realize how things were portrayed during the trial, what was and what was not tested, it's frightening, actually.
I mean, it's frightening, and the sad reality is that, if you and I had like a million clones of ourselves that could go out and dig into probably hundreds of thousands of cases the way that we dug into this, sadly, I'm here to report that we'd be finding this is not at all uncommon. You
No, but that's what, you've said it before, but I'm glad to do it. But it shouldn't be us 4 years after the fact raising red flags. And particularly in this community, look at what transpired during the time between her arrest and her trial. You have the Williamson County State's Attorney, Brandon Zanotti, retiring in disgrace because he was pulling some really shady financial stuff that involved a bank and real estate. And then tons of other people get caught up in that as well. So there was already a very flexible morality within the local government there. And I'm sorry, I stand by that in light of how difficult they've made it for us to get any kind of answers. It's a huge red flag.
Yeah, in talking about, in kind of in retrospect, I mean, we've certainly touched on the race element, but I don't think that we've gone so far as to hammer people over the head with the
Well,
concept.
7 is the first time. You and I wanted to shy away from it. Not shy away from it, but didn't wanna lean into it because we're not saying the only reason Julia Beverly was convicted was because she's Black. That's not what we're saying. We're saying that there was a lot of racially charged posts and conversations around that time. And episode 7, we give listeners a sample. Um, And I'm wondering if if those people who may or may not have worked for law enforcement, who wanted to leave negative things about, "Oh, woke. Oh, Black Lives Matter. Turn this crap off."
Right.
Well, guess what? It did exist. And not only on social media posts, but in voicemails, that were left for Renee. People were calling for a lynching. Let that settle in.
Right. And the connotations of that word,
Mhm.
I mean, look, Julie was a very convenient defendant for a lot of reasons. And one of the primary reasons was that she was mixed race in that county. I mean, there's no beating around that bush. I mean, it made it entirely an easier case for them to be able to prosecute the fact that she didn't look like everybody else.
It was part
And
of the othering, the othering.
right.
Um, so how long was it from arrest to trial? Over 2 years. So between the murder and the arrest, 4 days. But, Bob, that's what it takes. You need every one of those 4 days to do a very thorough investigation, as we've seen.
Wow, so snarky. Um, yeah, and like, I mean, here's the thing: like, you have cases where, like, I keep trying to think of a reason that gives some kind of pass to law enforcement for like what they did here, and I just, because like if you have a situation where, for all intents and purposes, you've got a homicide that's taken place in the home. You've got one person that was there at the time, and that person introduces a third party into the mix. And like where it's not like, oh, I came in, because it easily could have been that she just walked in and discovered Jade there. Now she'd have to deal with the cut on her hand, I suppose. You know, but once you introduce that third person into the mix, it becomes increasingly more difficult for me to be able to give them any kind of pass in terms of the lack of investigation they did, because they simply just disregarded it entirely. I mean, that's how that they developed tunnel vision immediately, because of the fact that they disregarded that was even a possibility. Like a true, like to where they were actually going to expend any resources or manpower or time in terms of trying to investigate what Julie said happened. I mean, that's how I mean, when you see, I mean, the sum total of their investigation into this mystery person was essentially the cop saying that he saw somebody in black walking their dog. I mean, there is nothing else that exists that relates to them investigating that claim. And I mean, when you start with just,
Which, spoiler alert, will come back to haunt them
yes, yes, it will.
in a major
Um,
way.
but to what you were talking about, I mean, like the surrounding area, and you've talked about it so many times, and it's because it's so true in terms of disposing of a weapon and bloody clothes. There were so many ripe areas to do that. I mean, we're talking about such a rural area, and they just did nothing in terms of searching that area. And now there's one person that I've been trying to get a hold of, and that you've been trying to get a hold of, and it's this canine handler that Renee has told us wanted to talk to somebody, but he only wanted to talk to a lawyer. So I sent him a very long text, you
I
know,
I stalked him again this morning. So yeah, it's interesting. You and I did have a conversation today about what it takes to be the person who has the courage to stand up because unfortunately, the way in which our system works is once, to use a Mataism, they like you for it. Once they decide that you're their person, it's really difficult to put the brakes on that. It's really difficult to get them to consider any other options. And once an arrest is made, you asked me to question how many cases have I covered where they've made an arrest, but they get new information 2 days later and they say, "Oh my gosh, we've made a mistake. So sorry."
right.
You know,
Cover
doesn't
to remember, like forget even just cover, like your entire memory. I honestly cannot think of any. Like the Barry Morphew, but like the Morphew thing, like they dismissed that because the evidence was suppressed. Like that wasn't, you know what I mean? They didn't think better of it. They didn't realize that they had made a mistake. I honestly cannot think of any case in recent memory where they've made an arrest and then walked it back a couple days later with a mea culpa. You know, it just, which is so stupid. Like I am
you
not going to
you know
sweat
what?
cops. I'm going to think, I'm going to be like, God damn, wow, they're actually doing their job. Like they really made an arrest. They realized that they were a little impetuous, and they got some new information in, and they corrected it. Huge applause for that. I'm not sweating them on that. Like, why do they think that people would sweat them on that? I think people value
They
the
people
concept of
we
getting the right person.
we want to be able to trust that the intention is justice, not winning.
Yeah.
There was a question before about jury selection, and
Yeah, it was this one here.
yes, so yes, and I'm going to give a little spoiler. Are you going to get angry?
No.
I'm just going to mention that you will hear from a juror.
Yes, you will.
You
That's kind
will,
of a that's kind
yeah.
of a huge spoiler.
We are protecting the person's anonymity.
True. Very true.
I'm not saying what you'll hear from the juror, but you will hear from a juror.
Yeah,
Um,
it was a really enlightening conversation. I mean,
yeah,
anytime you get the opportunity to talk to a juror on a case is always phenomenal. You know, it's
yeah, and we also know that there were a lot of connections between jury members and the family, jury members and law enforcement. There was a lot of stuff that wasn't disclosed that Thien did try to bring up,
yeah.
but it was
Um,
dismissed.
and thank you for your generosity, Idiot Wind. Idiot Wind had another one. Was there any hint of racial bias in jury selection? So, like a Batson challenge. Prejudices are real, 100% they are. And surrounding facts make this even more pertinent. So,
Yes, and again, it's a spoiler alert, but it was an all-white jury. There was a juror of color who spoke to a local reporter and was removed. I can also tell you, in terms of removal, you will hear a story going forward about an individual who's removed from the courtroom. And that person very much believes that race was involved in that decision. But we will dive into that. It is, I call it a misery onion of layers, but talk about a perfect storm of issues in terms of a trial. It would be hard pressed to just settle on 12, if not 20.
yeah, and I mean, when you're talking about a veneer in a county like where Marion's situated, I mean, you're going to get like there's no way that Julie's ever getting a jury of her peers because of where she lives. I mean, she doesn't live in an area that has enough of a black population to where she's ever going to get people of color down there, and whether it be because like when you and I first went down, like you and I were like, wow, I didn't see one black person like the entire trip. Now the next time we went down, we were kind of in Marion proper. Then we started seeing some people of color. So that was kind of, I guess it would be towards the south end of town as we were heading into Carbondale. Or it was definitely more populated down there. You did see some more uh ethnicity and some people of color in that area. But, in terms of, are they registered voters? Do they?
No, or, look, there are still towns in Southern Illinois which people who live there refer to as sundown towns.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And there's like, I mean, sundown towns exist. It's like there's somebody on Twitter. I ran into her. I thought I followed her because she had a pretty big following on Twitter, and she was like outing sundown towns all across the country. She had a whole map. And then like she would like occasionally she'd put a town that was a sundown town, or she'd indicated that it was a sundown town, or because she would do it. It was prior, back in the day, it was a sundown town, or it currently still is. And so she'd get like mad pushback. Like people like, we're not a sundown town anymore, and she'd be like, all right, well, and then she'd always spit facts. She'd always have all kinds of receipts that she'd have at her disposal because she wasn't just going in and guessing.
Mhm.
She was basing it on factual metrics and,
Who works there and who lives there.
right, exactly.
It's yeah, it's pretty it's so it is very interesting, I think that people are exhausted with the news cycle. People are exhausted with hearing bad news about the United States, bad news about their fellow citizens, but, the outrage of bringing up race at all just strikes me as so tone deaf and um, dishonest. We're not being honest with ourselves to think that race does not play into some of these cases. And it was an issue with this one. Um, and that's not an that's not my opinion. It's a
Right.
fact.
No, it's a fact. I mean, like we can't sit here and pretend that people of color are not treated differently by the criminal justice system. That would be ridiculous. I can tell you, having been in it for 23 years as a criminal defense attorney, that a vast majority of our clients were people of color. And we lived in an area, like we're outside of the city of Chicago, and like Chicago is very much a melting pot. So, it's always about the ratios in terms of, who's arrested. And like where we live out in Kane County, there's a pretty big Hispanic population, not a very large black population. And it just follows suit. Like a majority of our clients are Hispanic, and it's like when you kind of try to determine what are the root causes of crime, and I'm always saying it's typically mental illness and or addiction to either drugs, alcohol, or a combination of both. I mean, like if you're ever trying to figure out a root cause, it's almost always one of those two things or a combination of both.
And how that impacts a family unit, how that impacts, necessity, lack of resources, education, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And I guess that what bothers me, you've told me not to do it, but when you go and read Apple comments, the fact that people are outraged, um, in some of the comments about the fact that we mention race, we mention that there was Black Lives Matter signage in the house when police responded. That's true. Like, it's not something we would be remiss if we didn't address it,
Yeah.
that would be disingenuous.
It would be completely disingenuous and completely full of shit. I mean, it like I just won't do it. I just will not do it. It's like I've been in the system too long. I've seen the disproportionate amount of young black men that have been ripped away from their families. An entire generation of young black men was lost to the war on drugs bullshit.
Mhm.
And that like if people don't understand what that was, I mean that was an absolute system put into place to take young black men off the street. And like there's no two ways around it. I mean, it's like I mean, if you've never lived next to like an urban community that's underserved, which Oak Park, I grew up, I was literally on Austin Boulevard is on right on the border of Oak Park in the west side of Chicago. Austin is a massively it's a food desert, it's underserved. Everything bad about, what society does to these neighborhoods in terms of just not providing any kind of services. Businesses aren't willing to go in there because they're not policed properly. The schools are all for shit, so it means they don't get any teachers that are worth a damn going into the school that care about educating the children. It's like everything that makes those areas just so sad. So I grew up right there. So it's like I had that advantage of knowing what the real world was like I grew up knowing what the real world was like. I didn't live in some weird bubble. I didn't live in a small town where I was never uh, you know in any way, shape, or form um in the presence of people of color. It's like I grew up in a very integrated area, which is a gift if you want to be able to operate in this world and be comfortable in your own skin and be comfortable with other people and have the ability to not look at people and see color, but judge people by the human being they are. And it's like I don't think that people can do that unless they're accustomed to it. Like you can't do it from watching a TV show. I had a huge advantage because half of my friends growing up, like if you were to look at my friend group and the people that stood up in my wedding, half of my friends were black. Like I spent my youth being able to hang out at my friend's house, and half of my friends were black, so I'd be in their homes. You know what I mean? I like and vice versa. So it was just a thing where I was able to really be able to understand and appreciate a different culture in a way that you can't do it unless you do it. You know what I'm saying? You can't do it by listening to hip hop. You can't do it because I watch TV shows that have people of color. It's like it doesn't work like that. So it's like you have these situations where it's such a predominant thing,
Mm.
and it's like is like I guess what my point is here is that as much as we'll talk about the race, which I think is not all that much, I'm here to tell you that we undersold it
Oh,
because
gosh, yeah.
I think that it had a massive impact on what
Yeah.
happened here,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
that's a full stop on that. So,
There were a lot of good comments that came up while we were talking.
what do you got?
Mandy Jo had another one, where she had said that, it is a privilege to seek to understand racism without experiencing it. Um, and and yeah, I think that it goes yeah, yeah, it's true. It really is. That is true. I also think that that some of those comments on Apple speak for themselves.
Yeah,
They really do. So,
yeah,
that's all we have to say about that, but I would be interested to know, what your community thought about the comments that we chose to share in this episode. But also, it's interesting to know I sent you the script right before. Cut out a couple of them because they were so inflammatory.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
Ask Bob
Got
about
it.
his favorite lady when Mandy Joe wants me to ask you about the woman who fed you when you started your law career. And
Um,
even before that, when you were a social worker.
I mean, that's what she's talking about. Like, so before my law career, really, um, like I think I told you this story, right? Like, so like I had wanted to work. I didn't want to go to law school right away, and I wanted to help kids. So like, and I had a sociology degree, which is essentially useless unless you're going to teach or become a social worker or go to law school. I thought it was like, I loved the subject matter because I loved the macro study of society. It was fascinating to me. It was like right in my ballpark and it was like right in my wheelhouse. I found it utterly fascinating. And so I ended up not going to law school right away. And I'm like, all right, well, I can't really do shit with this thing. I don't want to. I kept answering all the. Do you like sports? Are you sports minded? And it would be like a selling blinds. Like I answered so many of those want ads for jobs going out, and then finally I'm like, you know what? Like I think I'm going to go take the test and try to get on with Department of Children and Family Services, DCFS, which is the equivalent of DCS or CPS. They call it different things in all different places. But and I went down and took the state exam once, scored 100, like literally 100%. Like 6 weeks goes by, and I call, and it's through the state of Illinois. I'm like, hey, and I was just curious. I scored pretty well on that test. Am I going to get a interview? Like, do they do that? Is that like how this thing works? He's like, well, it's like if they haven't called you yet, maybe you want to come back down, like, and take another exam because they may have like gone through that hiring cycle. I'm like, okay, go down, do it again, score 100 again, and nothing, like crickets. I'm like, wow, like it's probably because I'm a guy,
I was gonna say,
and
not fair, not fair, but
not fair, and it's a shame because I would have been the fucking most badass. Like
they
I would have saved lives. I absolutely would have gone in and saved kids' lives. I would have fucking roasted shit parent. Like, you know what I mean? I would have really, and I would have done the job.
you would have
So
cared.
I would
You
have
would have
cared.
cared.
I did care. I do care. I still care. So I couldn't find anything in the field. And then finally I ended up getting a job. So down in Harvey, Illinois, and Harvey is 99% black. So, and it was with Catholic Charities and it was working with seniors. So it was like the diametric opposite of working with kids. But at that point, I'm like, whatever, I'm going to go. Like, I want to get in the field. I want to try to help some people. And so I get down there. My first day in, I walk in and I am the only white dude, the only white dude or dude like person. And I'm like, this is, and it was basically all probably like 30 to 50-year-old black women. And there was one Hispanic guy named Ernesto. And like he was the only other dude. And then there was probably like 40 social workers in there. And I was there for like 4 years. And they loved me. Like all the women that worked there like loved me. They knew that I wasn't full of shit. They knew I was a genuine person. They knew I was a good person, and they knew that I didn't give a shit that I was going out because I was out. I was a caseworker. I'd go out and I'd knock on seniors' doors, and like the always the running theme. And I don't know how many people said this to me is I'd go in. And I'm sorry if y'all like on our channel that heard this story before, but I'd knock on the doors and I'd say, hi, I'm from Catholic Charities. I'm here to see if you need some services. I guess you would put a call in, whether it was Meals on Wheels or whether they needed, help with somebody, medically and, somebody to give them baths or whatever the case may be. What I quickly found out is that they really wanted was company, that most of these seniors were lonely, that they were just abandoned by their kids, a lot of them, which is sad, that just couldn't do it on their own. And then you know, I like like I'd say every other house I went into, these nice folks would say, "Hey, can I tell you something?" I'd say, "Yeah, of course." And they'd say, "Well, you're the first white man."
That just
These
blows
are
my mind.
people in their 70s, 80s, 90s, okay, that have lived a life, an entire lifetime, and telling me, you're the first white guy that's
Ever
ever
stood
been in
in
my
there. That's crazy.
house. I mean, think about that though, and I'm like, and I'd always say something to the effect, well, I hope I make a good impression. We're not all horrible people. And so it was always there's something to that
You're
effect.
a
And
good representative for the whites.
I
You're
like
you're
to think
you're a good representative.
I like to think that I am. I like to think that I am. So, but I did that for years, and it was really a worthwhile portion of my life. You can't make shit. It's underpaid, obviously, because it's a woman dominated field. And so it's undervalued and underpaid. But it's so important. And, it's like you can see the good that you're doing, when you're helping people. So it's like super rewarding in that sense. Um, but I like, that's what I'm saying. Like growing in Oak Park, like growing up in that town made me ready for that. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? Because
Yeah.
I think that would be hard for a lot of people that were not accustomed to being able to be I just like, and I never thought of it. Like honestly, it never was like something like, oh shit, I'm the only white guy in here. You know what I mean? I was like, I never had that feeling ever. And I never had that feeling going in to my clients' homes, because I don't know. So it's a thing that, it's taught. Like no one's born racist.
No,
It's
it's true.
yeah.
It's really true.
All right, let's see. Did you see some other good I wish you had the ability to tag them. All right, so this is one free radical that asked, does the ex-husband ever speak out? I mean, recently, I'm wondering what he thinks now.
So, wanna handle this with care and without a spoiler alert. Um, his family is speaking for him. But he is aware of what we have uncovered. And I guess I should just leave it at that for now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Um, all right, so this MB says the 911 call with the person running across the backyard. How far away was that house?
OMB. So we have had confirmation as to who claims to have made that call. And if the person who claimed to have made that call, who also was on the prosecution's witness list but never called, by the way, it's the house next door, the house that has those bodies of water and that wooded area. And what we then heard was a makeshift kind of camping place for um, transient people. A lot of stuff was going on in those woods. And that's the property that someone ran through
Yeah, I mean, right next door.
right next door.
It's the neighbor. I mean,
Highly,
it's
yeah.
like literally the neighbor. I have been obsessed with talking to this guy. Like, did we tell the story or like, do we?
It's coming.
All
It's
right.
coming. It's
Yeah.
coming. It's
Okay.
coming. It's coming.
So yeah. Yeah, that's still a guy that I really want to talk to. Okay. So we've got are the neighbors connected in the community or was this tunnel vision and racism? I mean, we've kind of answered that.
We've answered the racism part. So it's not so much that the neighbors are connected in the community, but they're part of a community that Beverly wasn't.
Right. I mean, that's the bottom line. And it's like she grew up there. so she had a lot of friends growing up, and she, she was you know, the person of color in her friend group, because most of her friends, with the exception of what,
Leah.
Leah,
Mhm.
were white, right?
Yeah.
You know,
And also in terms of the Songbird Road property, that property belonged to Michael Beasley's family. That was their property, and Julie paid for the modular home on it. So Julie owned the house, the Beasleys owned the property.
which is such a weird thing.
It is such a weird thing, but, those the cousins and they had grown up on that property. It's, I think, around over 2 acres. It's a big plot of land. Not as big as the property that we believe the masked intruder ran through. That's, I think, 5 acres.
Yeah, it's rural,
It's rural.
but like the neighbor to if you're facing what used to be the modular home, like I'm guessing it was like 50 yards, 55 yards, right? It like there's a good distance, and then like you said, they all have multi-acreage, lots. Like I think like Mike's lot is probably what, somewhere 3 to 5 acres. It's pretty big.
Yeah, I wanna say 2, 2.5. I'll find out for next week. I'll confirm the exact.
Yeah.
But I know that, the property where Butch and his sisters are is 5 acres with the ponds and the wooded back.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. That just got me thinking. I just fell deep into thought about something that,
I hope it has something to do with the
it
podcast.
does. It does. It was actually about something that Mrs. Black said to me, while she was kicking me off her patio, her porch, that kind of like I had not thought about it. I can't remember if I brought it up to you. Um, but let me ask you this. If if Julie and Jade were in a knockdown drag out, because I will die on this hill.
Mhm.
This never went from zero to murder.
I
Like
know where you're
it's
going.
so, but like if they're in a knockdown drag out, do you think that they'd be screaming not like I'm talking about at each other at the top of their lungs in a knockdown drag out fight?
No, and I'll tell you why. Takes a lot of energy to scream. You might
Yeah,
be
but
grunting, you might be, but no.
no,
You're not wasting your breath screaming.
I'm saying not forget that they're even like wrestling, but they just they're it's because it would have to start as an argument.
Mhm.
Now you've got kids, like, and I'm sure that every day of your children's lives has not been this idyllic wonderland that you always portray of happiness and joy. Teenagers can be teenagers. Like I have gotten into some screaming matches with Cameron, who will not back down from shit.
And
That
I got 2 of those. I have 2 of those. I
Yeah,
have 2 of those.
so but like if I'm in a yelling match with her, it's loud,
Mhm.
and there's
Oh, I
no
thought I thought you were saying yelling while they're physically fighting.
well,
Physically fighting with one another, no.
yeah,
But leading up to it,
have you ever seen a school fight? Like caught a video of a school fight of teenage girls? They're definitely screaming.
there's a lot of, again, we've talked about this, there's a lot of hair pulling, there's a lot of scratching, there's a lot of, so, you know, what we do know is the injuries that Beverly sustained are not in keeping with what poor Jade went through. The
100%. Here,
the that
here's my point. My point being that there was a bill in the world where Julie did this. there had to something precipitated it, wherein it built up from a domestic violent situation, meaning that there was some kind of altercation up to a homicide, and the preceding portion that starts as a screaming match
Mhm.
where they're screaming at each other. No one in this neighborhood, and there's nothing to stop sound, meaning that the guy across the street, because and this is what stuck me, and because she didn't talk to me, we're not putting her on, so it's not a spoiler. But she unequivocally told me that they heard no screaming.
And yet the far back neighbor said, "Oh, you should go talk to the senior member
Right.
of that family who told tons of people that he heard screaming." So, yeah, there's a lot of selective, recollection going
Yeah,
on in this case.
no question. All right, let's see. Curtis Flowers in Winona, Mississippi never could, but just 1 in 12 more, it was always hung. 0 to 1, 12, it was guilty. Idiot, I'm assuming that you're talking about he didn't have any blacks on the jury. He never could get any blacks on the jury. Is that what you're talking about? I mean, you're saying this guy got six retrials? Is that what you're saying, idiot Wind? That they tried this guy 6 times, that he appealed 6 times and they kicked it back 6 times? I mean, there's that one documentary called Four Trials, and I thought that was outrageous. 6 is unbelievable. Jesus. Clarify that in the chat, India Wind. Crypto tax lawyer, Lauren job, phenomenal job. Did premium so I could get the goods early and ad free.
So you've heard 8.
You know, she knows. Wait, Lisa, which is the great question? Did I miss it? Let's see. Lauren, you're killing somebody.
How am I killing you?
I'm sure it was with laughter.
Okay, good, good, hopefully.
I can guarantee it.
Mhm.
Let's see. Lisa's asking if they're listening to 8. Oh, wait, is this are you guys talking? Is this an 8? Is that 8? Yeah.
Yes. No, 7
So,
is 7 is, you go talk to Butch.
wow. Yep. 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 All right. I don't think I see any more questions. All right, you guys. Next week, do better. More
No,
questions.
don't you dare insult them.
See,
Don't
Lauren
you
will
dare.
always protect y'all. Let's see.
8's yeah, but in reality, it's not that big, not saying this to brag, but my farm's like, "Hello, Lisa. Party at your house."
Woo! She's always
Damn.
awesome. Lisa's a music gal too, so she's she be loving on some jam bands.
Yeah, we're gonna have a concert
Yeah, you'll
on
have
your
to drag
350
Milo
acre
down.
farm.
So Lauren's husband hates jam bands, hates them,
He's allergic to them.
hates them.
Eh.
So, have you ever fought with an 11-year-old who's in full-blown puberty? I can see yelling. Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Hormones raging. Ugh. My
Yeah,
father, our arguments, talking to like two like just loud men. So like when I'm 17 and feeling myself and trying to figure out who I am in the world and just not listening to a damn word he says, and just being a jerk teenager. Yeah, it's so much screaming.
yeah, there is so I'm the super patient mom until I lose it. And then there's absolute silence because they've made me scream. But, so I have to say I've been working on 11, which I pestered you about earlier today, and, I so look forward to 8, 9, and 10. 10, money back guarantee.
Yeah,
Jaws are gonna hit the floor.
it's a good one. It's a good one. All right. Lauren, I adore you.
Right
Um,
back at you. Say hi to Allie. I know
Rachel,
she did well today. She was, my gosh, she was busy.
she was. She went on with Melanie about the Karen Reed thing, and then I had Tony, and then you, which I had a little time kerfuffle today.
I'm sending
Which
him texts being like, "Hey, like
yeah, with a very
I
special,
showered. I
a
don't
very
smell.
special
Why are you
task.
ignoring me?"
Yeah,
And he was on Central
yeah,
Standard Time.
I was in the wrong time zone. So, and then I jumped on with Michael and Linda because there's a verdict coming in on the ASAP Rocky case, which is interesting. And then yeah, and then you. And then I think Allie set up another live. So no rest for the weary, Lauren.
You're
Oh,
busy.
I'm
Well, I'm
busy.
gonna go. I'm gonna go make Milo a late dinner.
All right. All right. Take care. Say hi to the fam.
I will. Right back at you.
All right, you guys, we
Okay.
love
Until
you.
next
Thank you for your
week.
support. Thank you for the questions, and we will see you next week. This week, I'm not going to blame you. I'm going to accept all the responsibility. I forgot to put a community post up. Community post, check on the page. I'll put a community post. That's where I want you guys to put your questions because it's really hard for me to kind of be scrolling through trying to pick out the questions. I should actually assign that to a mod, but whatever. So look for that in the community pages next week. All right, you guys.
All right. I can scroll for questions too, but then I won't be making eye contact with
That's what
you.
I'm saying.
So.
Like that's what I'm doing when I'm not making eye time. I'm trying to scroll.
Oh, I thought you were just scrolling social media.
No, that looks like I'm sleeping when I'm doing that.
All right. Have a good
No,
night, everybody.
see you guys.
Bye.
Bye. All right, so Lauren dipped. I almost forgot. Allie and I are coming back live again tonight, covering Reed. Which, if you don't know what was going on in Reed today, some pretty heavy duty shit went down, and it needs to be talked about. So I think we're going live. It's 7:30. I don't know if they've made the live yet, so keep an eye on that. And I think we'll probably be talking a little bit about I think we'll be talking about Richard Allen as well. So keep your notifications, hit those notifications. Make sure you hit the like button on this, please. Let's get Songbird Road out there to the people. You guys can do it. You can do it. I love you guys. We'll see you in a bit. Later.